speculation now about what the Iranians are up to. Widely speculated that what they're up to is what they've been up to twice before in comparable situations, where they're simply sending some missiles. They warned Qatar that the missiles were coming, and people believe perhaps what they're doing is basically saying, we retaliated, all's over, now it's time to make peace. That would be what President Trump would like to see. And there's also speculation about what's going on with some of the other countries in the world, including Russia. So joining us now to talk about this, coming back, very grateful. He was on recently and we loved him, so we asked him to come back. Geopolitical expert Dmitri Alperovitch, and making his two-way debut, Jamie Metzl, a national security expert, former government official. Grateful to you both for joining.
Happy to be here.
Jamie, here's the thing I love about Jamie. Here's what it says on his own website. This is the finest self-intro. Technology futurist, geopolitical expert, entrepreneur, sci-fi novelist, and keynote speaker. Jamie, that's pretty good. Tell us about being a sci-fi novelist.
Well, the main thing is you have to write science fiction novels, as far as I would say. So I encourage people to read my novels, Genesis Code and Eternal Sonata. And I'm actually writing a new novel right now called Virtuosa, which is about the intersection of AI, robotics, and classical music.
All right. My dad says hi. He asked me to tell you
I
hi.
love your dad.
He used
He's
to
been
work
a
with my
friend
dad.
he's a friend and mentor for many years, and he's just one of the world's most brilliant, special people.
Well, you're very nice. My dad doesn't have the best memory for people, and normally when I say, "Hey, do you know that person?" they say they worked with you. He's like, "Yeah," but with you, he knew right away. So
Good.
you
Well,
must be a special person. Thank you, Dmitri. Start with you, and again, thank you for coming back. What's your view of what Iran did today? Beginning of the end. What's your sense of things?
Yeah, clearly they're advertising very loudly, as they did in 2020 after we killed Soleimani, that they don't want to be in a conflict with us. They had to retaliate to save face. They told Qatar in advance the strike would be coming, knowing full well that the Qatar government would tell us and we'd be prepared for it. We shut down. We sent out communications to our staff, not just at the base in Qatar, but to Americans in the region hours before the attack to stay sheltered in place. So we knew this was coming. They did the same thing, by the way, when they launched missiles against our bases in Iraq in 2020, told the Iraqis, knowing that the Iraqis would tell us. So I think it was still, very lucky that we were able to intercept most of these missiles and did not have any Americans die. In 2020, it was a much more closer call because many of these missiles did land on our base there, and we had servicemen that suffered significant concussions and could have perished. So we lucked out, and I think this is probably the end of our engagement, at least for now, with Iran.
So that's pretty bullish on the upside and in line with what the administration would like to see. Jamie, or do you share that optimism?
I do, but it's hard to be eternally optimistic. The enemy always gets a vote. It's obviously a fluid situation, but for right now, this has been a pretty incredible 2 weeks, both for Israel, for America, and frankly, for the free world. Iran has been such a menace. They've destroyed multiple countries, and Iran is in a much weaker position for now. But I also presume that the government is going to very aggressively crack down on its own people. And so this isn't the end of this story. But if you just now compared to where we were 2 weeks ago, I think we're in much better shape.
Okay. I want to talk about the reaction of the opposition party. And Jamie's worked in Democratic administrations and had a very interesting, some might say provocative tweet in support of what the president did. And there are many Democrats who agree with Jamie, but there continue to be others who don't. And the range of reaction in the Democratic Party is quite vast. First, I want to say something that seems to agree with Jamie. This is former Congressman Ted Deutsch of Florida, who has been, this number 9, who has been a longtime hawk on issues related to Israel and to Iran. And he tweeted today, again, very similar to what Jamie tweeted yesterday. Do we have that number 9, please? Here we go. All right. Well, for some reason that's coming up. It's too small for me to
You
read.
better put on your glasses, Mark.
Yeah, I'll
Mark,
just
pick up your glasses.
You can take it back down. Basically, he runs through all the reasons why there's reason to believe that Iran's nuclear program had to be taken out, and supports what the president did. Here is number 10. This is Hakeem Jeffries taking a different position, the Democratic leader in the House. Number 10, please.
Donald Trump and his actions, which do not appear to be consistent with the United States Constitution, takes unilateral offensive military action without seeking the approval of the United States Congress. The use of military force, which is offensive in nature, must be approved by the House and the Senate. That's according to the Constitution. It's not optional, Donald. It's not.
Okay. Jamie, tell me what you think the position of your party is now on the president's strikes.
Well, Mark, you know that the Democratic Party is not a party the way the Europeans might think of a party being a party. The Democratic, quote unquote, party is a coalition of different groups. But it does seem that the main thrust of Democratic voices has been more critical of this step than I have been. And you can imagine an alternate universe going back decades where every time a president used force in any kind of circumstance, they always went to Congress for approval. And that's just not the system that we have lived in. That wasn't the case under President Obama, under President Biden, and other presidents. And so I do think that there is a potential constitutional issue, but that applies to lots of presidents doing individual actions like this. And as Congressman Jeffries was saying, well, according to his statement, the differential was that this was offensive. And because this is a tit for tat, and because over the past 46 years, thousands of Americans have been killed by Iran and its proxies, and that war is ongoing, I think that's a hard case to make. Would I like to live in a world where across multiple generations, Congress played a central role in decisions about how to use force? Yes. Have we lived in that world? No. And so then the question is, for a presidency that does have latitude and has had latitude to use force in circumstances like this, is this just a wise decision in defense of America's interests or not? And so I believe that it was. I mean, as I said in my various communications, Iran has declared its intent, and that's been very, very clear. They've built the capacity to realize that intent, and whether it's ballistic missiles or a nuclear weapons program or everything else they've done, or their proxies, and they have implemented terror and the threat of terror through those things. So I think it's an active threat. I think it's appropriate for us to respond.
Jamie, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the president's gone on Truth Social and announced a ceasefire. Congratulations to everyone. It has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire. Dmitri, what do you make of that?
Well, I think things were heading down this path. There were indications that the Israelis were reaching out privately to Iran, probably through intermediaries, basically saying that they would like to put the stop to this, and they believe they've accomplished most of what they needed to accomplish. Their ability to sustain this operation for weeks on end was probably quite limited. Iran is still a long way off from Israel. Flying there in single-seater fighter jets like F-35 is very, very difficult. There's always a chance something goes wrong, a malfunction, pilot has to eject over Iran, then you have to get them back. Maybe even an air defense system that they have neutralized, being able to shoot a aircraft down. So the risk was substantial. They feel like they've proved the point. They've set the program back by at least some time. We'll see how long. And it was time to end this. And they actually amplified their bombing campaign in the last 24 hours by going now after the regime targets, like the Basij group, this paramilitary group that the Iranians have to basically suppress the population, clearly sending a message, hey, if you don't come to the negotiation table and get a ceasefire, we'll undermine your regime even further. Not just go after your ballistic program or the nuclear program, we'll go after the regime targets in a much more aggressive way. And it looks like the Iranians got the message. They saved face by sending missiles into our base in Qatar, and now they can say they'll sell this internally. I'm sure we've destroyed half of Tel Aviv. Of course, they didn't, but that's what they're saying internally. We've destroyed, the American base in Qatar. Of course, they didn't, and now they can have a ceasefire.
All right. Again, if you want to get in on the conversation in just a little bit, because we're going to do two topics tonight, please raise your hand. Jamie, a ceasefire is not a peace agreement or a nuclear disarmament agreement. How do you think, if there is a peace deal, how does the negotiations for denuclearizing Iran and getting rid of their ballistic missiles, how does that go? Who's at that table?
Yeah, so I think if a peace deal seems like a high obstacle to clear, but I think there'll be some kind of agreement, and we're going to see. I mean, there's going to be a lot of pressure on Iran to forsake the possibility of doing any enrichment, to open to inspections. Yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu said we're now going to treat Iran like Lebanon with zero tolerance. So if they start rebuilding any of these facilities or other facilities, we're going to target those the way that they are going to target those the way that Israel targets those in Lebanon. So I don't know whether there's going to be a peace deal, but there's going to be something, some kind of negotiation that is going to require some kind of commitment to not rebuild, or an agreement between the United States and Israel that there will just be continued process of whack-a-mole. But it'll be important to have some kind of inspection process in place, because the second the Iranian regime has latitude, they are going to begin rebuilding a lot of the capacities that have been degraded. And very significantly, I actually am quite worried for the population of Iran. After this humiliation, as Dmitri said, the one target that the Iranian regime can easily go after is the Iranian public. And if the more that they fear that their position is vulnerable, the more aggressive they are going to be using their tactics of terror, imprisonment, and murder to keep the population down.
All right. I'm wondering if you guys have heard of Polymarket. Have you two heard of Polymarket?
Yep.
Okay. So for those who don't know, it's a prediction market. It takes traders from all over the world who put in real money. They forecast on events in the headlines, whether things will happen or not. As new reporting comes out, the estimates change on these probabilities, and that's how the odds get updated. Now, these traders may know what they're talking about or not, but over time, the correct traders make money and the incorrect traders lose money. So money tends to flow to the more accurate traders who can correctly predict what will happen. Here's on Polymarket what they're saying about the Ayatollah. This is number 20, please. The Ayatollah, will the Ayatollah survive? So he'll still be the leader of Iran in 2025, and you can see down, 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 then up, 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 and now at 43% chance in the Polymarket market on this question of will Khomeini survive to the end of the year. So let me ask both of you, Dmitri, you first. Do you think he will survive to the end of the year?
I think he probably does. Not super confident in that, but as Jamie just said, they're going to have a huge crackdown on, first of all, trying to find anyone that worked with Israel to identify all the targets that the Israelis have prosecuted over the course of the last week and a half. They're going to go after any opposition that they see, real or otherwise. So that will probably strengthen the regime, but it's always possible. The Israelis apparently have been reaching out to members of the regular military, not the IRGC, but the military that is the state military, not the military of the Ayatollah, to try to get these generals to think about orchestrating a coup. So something might happen, but probably relatively low chance.
Jamie, where would you put down your fiver if you were betting in the Polymarket on this question?
Yeah, I think more likely than not. I agree with Dmitry. More likely than not, I think he makes it through the year. And the reason is terror actually works. I mean, the reason that the Soviet Union collapsed is that Soviet leaders weren't willing to use the weapons that they had to engage in murder. I mean, had they started gunning down everybody on the eastern side of the Berlin Wall, the history would have been very different. And you look at North Korea. I mean, it's a regime that doesn't have a lot going for it, but it's willing to, it monopolizes terror and is willing to use however much terror is required to stay in power. And so I think these guys are going to do the same. And because there isn't any kind of real organized opposition, because even these popular uprisings have been so brutally suppressed, and the stakes for doing anything like the Green Revolution and these other revolutions will be that much higher, I actually think that they have a formula for staying in power.
Now, of course, the caveat is he is 86, so I don't have actuarial tables in front of me, but natural course of events may take precedence here.
Yeah. All right. If you want to get in on the conversation, please raise your hand. Here's Ray from Ohio for a question for Jamie and Dmitri. Ray, welcome in.
Thanks, Mark. I was going to ask, I was actually going to wait for the Cuomo part of the discussion because I have a Cuomo question. Can I come back later?
Yes, sir. You can. Well, you can, or you can ask. You mean instead or in addition?
Instead, I was
all right. Yeah, come back later, Ray. I'm muting you now. All right, Peter. I know Peter wants to ask about this topic. Peter, tell folks where you are, what's on your mind after you unmute. There you go.
Hi, coming to you again from Northern California. And, you know, what I wanted to ask about this, and first of all, like my overall mood as someone who was wary of this whole path of launching the strikes and stuff, I would say that I'm relieved that things seem to be heading towards this off-ramp. You know, I think there was a really good piece by Sarab Amari and Dan Caldwell, you know, the former DoD advisor, and one other person I forget, basically outlining the two possible scenarios, one which was the off-ramp scenario and one which was the, you know, escalatory scenario. And I'm very relieved personally that we're heading towards the, you know, the off-ramp, at least for now. But what I would say, you know, what my question would really be is like, you know, a lot of the impetus for the need to take military action against the Iranian nuclear program seems to be premised on this idea that the Iranian regime is uniquely, you know, irrationally suicidal, you know, because of their, you know, Shia Muslim ideology, which, you know, I'm not saying that you guys are saying that, but it just seems like there's a lot of that hawkish discourse in the air was premised on that. Doesn't this kind of disprove, like, and, you know, you saw it with this is sort of what happened with Soleimani. They, you know, they had this sort of symbolic retaliation that we're seeing now. Like, doesn't this prove that there's not this complete insanity that some people allege here?
Well, maybe I'll go first, but I know Dmitri and I will both have thoughts. I haven't heard many rational people making that argument that Iranians are uniquely crazy and these uniquely crazy people need to be suppressed. There is a state ideology that has translated into a strategy that Soleimani represented, and actually in the editorial, I think it was the Wall Street Journal yesterday about Netanyahu versus Soleimani, as quoted, if it was accurate, Soleimani, what he said a few months before he died is, I've built these multiple armies, and we have a path all the way to the Mediterranean. So Iran was very strategic, and they had a goal for regional hegemony. And in my mind, they were using the threat of Israel as a vehicle to justify building these capacities, overthrowing these states, building these militias, building these nuclear capabilities. But the reason why so many of the Gulf states and others have been quietly rooting against Iran isn't because these guys think, oh, the Shias are all crazy. It's that they recognize a regional hegemonic strategy with these subparts that were being realized by Iran. And so if it was, let's go after the most crazy group of people in the Middle East, you'd have to frankly bomb everybody. What this is about is denying and undermining the primary source of instability and insecurity in one of the most important strategic parts of the world. Dmitri?
Great. Dmitri.
I agree with that. I actually don't think any state out there, whether it's Iran or North Korea, is irrational. In fact, they're pursuing their interest as they see them. We may disagree with that in a very rational way. It's very clear that the Iranian regime is not suicidal. Judge purely by the fact that the Ayatollah is hiding in a bunker right now and has no interest in dying.
True.
Look, I think the case against the Iranian nuclear program is actually a very simple one. A, you want fewer states out there to have nuclear weapons, period, because the more states that have nuclear weapons, the more there's a danger of a nuclear war that can destroy humanity. And more specifically, a state that has an explicit ideology to scream death to America, death to Israel, probably should not have nuclear weapons. And a state that has committed numerous offenses against our country, starting in 1979 with the takeover of our embassy and holding our diplomats hostage, to killing of our CIA chief of station in Beirut in the 1980s and kidnapping a number of Americans there. And then more recently, maiming and killing over 1,000 American servicemen in Iraq. That state probably is not in our best interest for that state to have a nuclear weapon.
Peter,
now, you can
thank
argue what to be doing to stop that, and whether going to war with them or bombing them is a good idea or not. But the idea that we should stop them from having nuclear weapons, I don't think is a controversial one.
Dmitri, thank you. Peter, thank you. Ben, welcome, and tell folks who don't know where you are what's on your mind for Jamie and Dmitri.
Yeah, so I grew up junior high into high school during 9/11 War on Terror. So admittedly, last few weeks, hearing, possible bombing of Middle East, and then people talking about regime change, it kind of, I think, almost a PTSD trigger reaction, even though I understood it. And then this weekend happened, and it still feels very different. And for me, my question is there a historical precedent that we can compare this to? Is the 91 bombing of Iraq from Israel a like for like comparison? I think a lot of people, regardless of what side of the aisle they fall on, they try to compare a current event to something in history either way. And I just want to know from your guys' perspective if there's something to compare this to, or is this a whole different thing and there's not really anything to compare it to historically?
Great question, Ben. Dmitri.
Look, I think there are a number of comparisons. Certainly, the Israeli attempts to destroy regional nuclear programs going back to 1981 with a hit on the Iraqi nuclear reactor back then, or the Syrian nuclear reactor in 2007 are examples of that. But this is so much bigger, right? A nuclear weapons program was not the only target. The ballistic missile program, the leadership were targeted as well. This was a sustained campaign, not a single strike. So you could compare this to the Kosovo war, right? The air war for about 30 days that we had against Kosovo to ultimately get Slobodan Milosevic to withdraw from Kosovo, which succeeded. Maybe something like that. But again, nuclear issue was not really on the table there. So I think this is quite unique when you look at the fact that you have two huge powers in the Middle East, obviously Israel being one and Iran being the other, fighting a war that involved more missile launches, ballistic missile launches against a nation than we've ever had in history.
Jamie, can you think about historical antecedent?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly the Osirak, and there are lots where there's a growing threat, and one state has a decision to make. Do we let this threat grow, or do we try to take it out preemptively? And in every one of these situations, everybody is trying to say, what are the lessons that we've learned in the past? And we certainly saw that with Iran. We're seeing it in Ukraine, where the way the Ukraine war is being fought, and I hope the United States stays in it, is a direct response to Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. And this is one step beyond that, where actually very, very few people on the ground, everything done with the air, through the air, a systematic process by Israel of degrading Iran's ability to fight back. And then I thought a very strategic effort by Israel to decrease the cost to the United States of taking this single act. And because Israel could de-risk this intervention by the United States, it looks like, and you never know, but from the perspective of today, it looks like this was a big win because Israel set up a relatively straightforward effort by President Trump and by the Americans. And so in that regard, you might even say this is a little bit like Grenada, that coming after what happened at the end of Afghanistan, this was from the US perspective, relatively easy, straightforward, and limited, and we were able to do it and declare victory. And if this ceasefire holds really in any way, I think the United States will be able to pull back. There's an off-ramp, and the real variable is going to be, one, how do the Iranians behave going forward? Is the lesson that they take away from this that they need to even more secretly sprint towards a nuclear bomb? And two, how aggressively will the Israelis primarily seek to enforce violations of whatever may or may not be agreed? Because that has been the traditional game of the Iranians. You make whatever agreement you have to, and then you wiggle out of it, and then you start making trouble for the IAEA inspectors or whomever they are. And then because of the salami slice issue, nobody's ever willing to go to war over one inspection or one camera that's been taken down. But that will likely be the game going forward.
Ben, thank you. Gentlemen, I want to show you the Vice President of the United States just moments ago on Fox with Bret Baier talking about the current situation. Let's listen to the Vice President, please.
About the next 6 hours, right, finalizing the attacks. I mean, what I think what he's talking about is right now, for the American people watching, it's dark over there. That's typically when the Israelis and the Iranians have been shooting at each other. I think there's some recognition that that might continue for another few hours. And tomorrow really is a new day. The end of the 12-day war, the end of the Iranian nuclear program. And I really do believe the beginning of something very big for peace in the Middle East.
All right, gentlemen, thoughts on that, please.
Look, I don't think that this is the end of it in terms of Israel-Iran by a long shot. I think the most consequential outcome of this last 11 days or so is actually not the setbacks that the Iranian nuclear program has suffered, because that is reconstitutable. We have not destroyed that program by a long shot. There's still facilities, particularly one facility buried deep under the mountain of Natanz, even deeper than Fordo, where they manufacture in centrifuges, and we probably can't take that out, even with a massive ordnance penetrator bomb that we dropped on Fordo and Natanz on Saturday. But the most important outcome is that Israel has crossed the Rubicon in the sense of demonstrating that they can and will attack Iran repeatedly if Iran tries to reconstitute that program, or rebuild, by the way, the ballistic missile program, which Israel views just as big of a threat as a nuclear program. So I think you're going to see periodic, what Israel calls mowing the lawn, right? If Iran starts reconstituting these programs, as it's very likely to do, you'll see a repeated bombing campaign in 6 months or 12 months, wherever it may happen, to make sure that Iran never again builds up a program that is as close as it was on the nuclear side, or builds up the retaliatory capabilities that did produce quite a bit of damage in Israel, right? Over $1 billion worth of damage, dozens of people killed, hundreds of wounded. Israel doesn't want to see them building that up again.
Jamie, it's incredible, all the things that led up to Israel being able to bomb Iran with some impunity, including what we saw today in the remarks of Putin, lukewarm support for Iran. Did this all happen by design, that all this happened at the same time, or is it just the luck of the Israelis in this case?
I definitely don't think it's luck. Israel has been planning pieces of this for many decades, but certainly the catalyst was October 7th. Had October 7th not happened, had that fuse not been lit, it would have been very difficult for Israel to take this series of steps. And we saw that soon after October 7th, when basically the Americans prevented Israel from doing the walkie-talkie attack on Hezbollah because it was too risky. But what we've seen is, as a result of this planning, and this planning also involves building up your economy. Israel built up a modern economy, a modern tech sector, a modern industrial sector, a weapons sector, all of those things. So Iran spent $500 billion on these nuclear capabilities that are now mostly in ruins. Israel spent far less than that building a soft superpower status of just the knowledge of its citizens. And that is what is being brought to bear here. And certainly, I think that as Vice President Vance said, there's a possibility of a whole new Middle East emerging from this. And I think the odds of that happening are much greater now than they were 2 years ago. But nothing is inevitable. There's going to have to be a lot of hard work, and the two big variables are, number one, the Saudis, because what the Saudis do, and if the big win for President Trump would be moving forward on bringing the Saudis into the Abraham Accords, and then something will have to happen on the Palestinian side, and if there could be some kind of process to get some of the hostages back, and the Hamas is going to try to maintain its relevance, and it's going to, like the Iranians, they're going to try to do so with terror. But if the game can be switched, and if, just as Israel is trying to empower other voices across the Middle East, looking at what's happened to Iran, other people, other voices in Gaza will be empowered. You can imagine possibilities for change, but as always in the Middle East, everything can always go wrong.
Jamie, your old friend Michael Granoff from Tel Aviv is joining us now in the middle of the night. Michael, good morning. Are you up again, or you've been up?
No, I just got up because I have 3 kids in the Army, but I luckily have one still at home, and he just was wise enough to come wake me up and show me the tweet. And so then I decided I better sign on.
Okay, well, glad to have you.
Nice to see you, Mike.
What's
You
the
too,
day?
Jamie.
What's the day been like in Israel?
It's been kind of surreal. We went back to the highest restrictions since the American attack the other night, so nobody really going out very much, and everybody, frankly, trying to be productive and go about their days, but very distracted by everything going on. We did not have any sirens during the day tonight. We had one in the middle of the night last night, and then there was also one actually. Now that I remember, this morning. It's hard to keep track, but none in the last 12 hours or so.
Okay, Dmitri, any questions for Michael?
Not at the moment.
No. Okay, Jamie.
Yeah. So with this ceasefire, Mike, what are you anticipating people are going to feel in Israel? That we did it, we did what we needed to do, and we degraded Iran, and we have an off ramp. But do you think this will be a pure celebratory feeling? What do you anticipate the feeling is going to be as day breaks in Israel?
Great question.
I think people will be very, very excited and happy. And I'll tell you that that when there was the ceasefire in Lebanon last fall, many people, myself included, were very uneasy and weren't sure that it was the right thing, because maybe we were so close to completely obliterating Hezbollah that we should have just gone ahead and finished the job. But as it turns out, the big difference between the 2006 ceasefire with Hezbollah and this last one is that the enforcement mechanism was the IDF, and in fact, it has continued to be the IDF. And when there is a violation, the IDF goes in and enforces it. And so that really was kind of the best of all worlds. And I would think that in some sense here, I don't really honestly expect that the Iranians are going to do anything to provoke a further attack, but I can be sure that the incredible intelligence that has been demonstrated that we've been able to have with Iranians will continue to be in force, and so I think there's very little downside to us stopping now from what I can tell now.
Okay, Michael, thank you. We continue to pray for you and your family, and grateful to you for getting back up, and hope you get at least a little bit of a nap in before the morning meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, we're going to switch over to talk about another big story that's of concern to Michael and Jamie, at least. I don't know if Dmitri cares who the mayor of New York City is, but we're going to talk about that in just a moment. So gentlemen, thank you both for being here, and hope you'll come back regularly. Dmitri, thank you for coming back. And Jamie, great to have you on, and hope you'll come back regularly.
Thank you.
All right, in a minute, we're going to bring in two gentlemen who are running for mayor of New York City, and you'll be able to ask some questions about the race. We'll look at where things stand. But first, a word from both of our sponsors. We're delighted to have two sponsors here for this program. Those of you who support Two-Way and Two-Way Tonight, I hope are delighted. Cozy Earth is one of our great sponsors. And of course, now that it's summer, you want to think about Cozy Earth and Cozy Earth products, because nothing is better in summer than staying cool. And their products made from viscose from bamboo naturally wick away heat and moisture from your body, helping you sleep several degrees cooler, which right now, wherever you are, is important. Cozy Earth bamboo sheets, their all-day tea, their studio pan collection, all keep you cool. You get, with the sleep products, 100-night sleep trial. You can try them out, see if you like them on these hot nights. And if you don't love them, you can return them hassle-free. I doubt you'll do that, which means you're going to get the 10-year warranty that comes with all their bedding products. It's a decade of cool, quality sleep. You can upgrade your summer sleep now. Head to CozyEarth.com. Use the code Two-Way for 40% off their best-selling sheets, pajamas, and more. Again, use the code Two-Way for that big discount, 40% off. Sleep cooler, lounge lighter, stay cozy with Cozy Earth products. That's our first sponsor. And now our second sponsor is somebody who you've probably heard of and you need if you're in the midst of looking to fill a job. We all know how important that is when you come to have to hire. You want to hire right away, and doing that can be a challenge, but Indeed is all you need. So you stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. Indeed sponsored jobs help you stand out. They help you hire fast. Sponsored jobs, you post them, they go right to the top of the page for the most relevant candidates so you can reach the people you want faster. It makes a huge difference. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have a 45% chance of 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. There's no need now to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring immediately with Indeed. Listeners of this show, here's another discount for you. Get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/two-way. Again, go to Indeed.com/two-way right now. Support this show by saying you heard about Indeed on this program. Indeed.com/two-way. Terms and conditions apply. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. All right, the New York City mayor's race, incredible story. And as I said the other night, it's really undercovered by the national media, which is rare because most stories in New York City get overcovered. Here's another market from Polymarket. Before you see there are two New York City candidates, Michael Blake and Whitney Tilson. But here's from Polymarket. This is a huge change in projections in the market on the race. I think keying off a poll that came out today. This is, let's see, number 21, please. And you can see there, the blue line is Andrew Cuomo, who's been the front runner for most of the race. And then his challenger is caught up to him. Mr. Mondani is now virtually tied in the poly market with bettors around the world wagering that the race has gotten tighter, and you can see they are neck and neck. And although they are the two candidates who have been ahead in most of the polls, they are not the only candidates in the race. So delighted now to be joined by two others who have been running in this race with a big field. People have had difficulty getting attention away from the two front runners. So joining us now, as I said, here's Whitney Tilson and Mr. Blake. Gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining. Whitney, start with you. Explain why you made the decision to run for the mayor of New York City.
Well, back in November, it was a very wide open field. Cuomo wasn't in the race. No one had ever heard of Mondani. And I thought there was a lane, particularly coming out of the election, for a real change candidate, someone in the Mike Bloomberg mold, business person, not a career politician. And I felt my city was going in the wrong direction, and I could manage it better, bringing that business background, not being beholden to all the special interests that most of the career politicians sadly are. So obviously the race has changed. The lane has really closed. And I forgot one thing, by the way, that Mike Bloomberg figured out: become a billionaire first so that you can drop 72 million in the race and buy name recognition.
Ain't bad. And I think it's pretty clear that without that money, Mike Bloomberg probably would not have won. Michael Blake has a long career working in government as running for elective office, but also serving as an advisor to many people. Michael Blake, welcome in. Same question to you. What caused you to run for the job of New York City mayor?
Mark, great to see you. Good evening, everybody. Look, I wanted to make it very clear that, especially after Trump won again, that we had to have a voice at City Hall who actually was going to have White House, State House, and local experience. and can actually show and demonstrate that we are not going to be silent on the economic conversation. I think many of the reasons why we lost is that we were poor at communicating, and we actually weren't connecting with people when it comes to economics and jobs. And so what I've been laying out very clearly is that you can have both. You can represent communities of color. You can make sure white communities are empowered. You can represent rich and poor. You can have outer borough and in the city. And so I made the decision very clearly that you have to have someone who actually has experience at all three levels. And the latest days, and even last night, is a continual reminder. Anything happening around the world, New York City is impacted, and anything happening in New York City impacts the rest of the world.
Gentlemen, so grateful to you for joining. If you want to get into questions to these gentlemen running for New York City mayor, or a question about the race, please raise your hand. Ray's got his hand up already, but others are welcome in to join. Michael Blake, who's the best mayor of the last 6 New York City mayors, and why?
I said David Dinkins. And I think when you actually highlight the intentionality of how he approached addressing equity, in particular the outer boroughs, that is why. A lot of people, of course, will look at successes from other mayors. But I think at the end of the day, when you have a city of close to 9 million people, you have to find ways that you bring everyone to the fold. And one of the main reasons why I'm running is on that vision. I've said consistently that you have to end credit scores when you think about home ownership. You have to find ways that you think about economic issues. You have to have 1,000 mental health professionals instead of NYPD. You have to be able to reject anti-Semitism as well as Islamophobia. You have to address anti-Blackness as well as what's going on in the Latino community. And I do believe Mayor Dinkins effectively was able to do that. And that's why I would say it was him.
Okay, Whitney, who's the best mayor in the last 5 and why?
Well, you won't be surprised to hear, given I'm running in his lane, Mike Bloomberg. He managed the city, I thought, exceptionally well, particularly in the area of reforming the school system. This by far the single largest area of spending in the city. And he navigated us through the global financial crisis, where he had to cut the budget in 2008 and 2009, did it in a way that didn't wreck the city. And I'm worried that with Trump tariffs and all of his madness, we may have, as a city, have to navigate through a recession broadly, and/or Trump and the Republicans slashing funding to the city that's going to require similar managerial skill.
All right, Whitney, this is not meant to be a negative question, but just to reveal again your perception of how to govern the city. Who's the worst mayor of the last 5 and why?
I'd have to say our current mayor, just because the depth of corruption and selling out the city to try and keep himself out of prison, selling out the interests of the city to Trump.
Separate from the allegations of corruption, has he governed the city well?
I would actually say on a policy basis, I actually am in agreement with many of his policies, which have tended to be reasonably centrist and law and order, which is, in my lane as well. But he has not been an effective manager and has put, all sorts of cronies in. He's on his 4th police superintendent, and he's finally got a good one in Jessica Tisch. But 4 police commissioners in 4 years, that's embarrassing.
Michael, who's the poorest performing mayor of the last 5 in your view, and why?
Rudy Giuliani, because of stop and frisk. It was and still is unconstitutional. And when we think about the reality, it is the reason why Republican, independent, and Democratic leadership have all indicated that it was and still is unconstitutional. Moreover,
yes, so go ahead.
Moreover, when you think about the separation of communities across the city, in particular outer boroughs, you saw a greater dynamic of an increase of income inequality that happened under Rudy Giuliani than anyone else. And so what we are facing right now is a significant concern of people not being able to afford their bills. And that primarily, as well as the challenges around criminal justice and public safety, happened under Rudy Giuliani.
Is there anything he did, Michael, as mayor that you applaud?
You can't ignore that under 9/11, the leadership that happened there. Of course, look, and I'm from the Bronx, right? So I can never forget that day when we returned baseball, right? And everyone came to Yankee Stadium. The leadership was present. No question about that. I acknowledge that there. And I think anyone who's a good leader can acknowledge even if someone is of a different party. If they're doing good, you can acknowledge those points.
Michael, what's something you know about how to well run for mayor of New York City that you didn't know the day you got in?
There's a depth of the child care crisis that is deeper than has been internalized. We all know that child care and housing are the two main expenses. But when you really start to go into different communities, in particular, Mark, that you have nonprofits that were struggling to get reimbursed by the city because of inaccurate attendance data, it was crippling. And it was really having devastating impact across the city, which I didn't realize to the level of degree until we got in.
Yes, sir. Whitney, same question.
Yeah, a couple things I would cite. One is I'm much more bullish on New York now than I was 7 months ago when I got in, having gone to every corner of the city. The vibrancy, particularly driven by immigrant communities, Little Yemen, and that kind of thing, the entrepreneurial vibrancy, particularly that immigrants bring, has just really blown my mind. Also, just the sheer size of this city. The four largest boroughs of the 5 boroughs in New York, if they were individual cities, would be in the top 8 largest cities in the United States. 5% of US GDP is created in the 5 boroughs of New York. So this is just an incredible city. And even if it's not particularly well run by career politicians, we're still going to be okay, with the exception, and I'm sure we will get to this, if Zohran Mamdani and his band of DSA radical socialists take over this city, I'm really worried.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you 2 questions about Mamdani, and I'm very reluctant always to ask candidates who are putting themselves up for public office to comment on other candidates or play pundit. But I'm going to ask you one pundit question, and then I'm going to ask you one question which is not a pundit question, although you might think it is. We showed you a poly market before. The gap in the poly market has narrowed quite dramatically between Cuomo and Mamdani. Whitney, who's going to be the Democratic nominee for mayor?
I think Cuomo's going to pull it out. Mamdani has run a very clever and very smart campaign. He's a brilliant politician, which I think makes him dangerous. He's the DSA's Trojan horse, in my opinion. But I actually, just for fun, put $1,000 on Cuomo on poly market. Well, actually on Kalshi, but same thing. When this morning, Mamdani was actually favored when this latest poll came out, showing that Mamdani is going to win by 3 points. I think Cuomo's going to pull it out, but it looks to be close.
Yeah, Michael, who's going to win?
Well, we're candidates right now, so I don't think it's
okay.
I'm going to be a good candidate and not talk about other numbers. But I would say this: I think people are going to be very surprised by the actual turnout tomorrow and a week from now, because all that's going to be announced tomorrow are first choices.
Yep.
And I do believe that you're going to have a significant black-brown turnout that happens tomorrow that has not been accounted for as of yet.
Yeah. Important to remember, as Michael just referenced, we're not going to know who is going to win for about a week, while New York City finds an abacus or whatever it is they're going to use to.
Yeah, we'll have an idea if Cuomo's up by 3 points or less. It's probably going to go to Mamdani by the time all the second and third choice votes. It's an absolute toss-up if Cuomo's up by 5 tomorrow night, and above that, Cuomo probably wins.
Yeah, I think that's good analysis. I'm gonna skip my next question and just bring in Ray, a man of New York, although he's the good or poor sense to move to Ohio, but spent a lot of time in his native New York. Ray, welcome in. Question for Michael and Whitney.
Thank you, Mark. Bronx born and raised. My quick question: the Democratic power structure has rallied around former Governor Cuomo. So one of the criticisms of the Democrats is that the old guard continues to dominate the party and shuts out new voices. Do you think the Democrats rallying around a candidate in this particular case is a benefit or detriment to the voters trying to make up their mind?
Great question. Michael first, then Whitney.
Look, I think that it's been safe for a lot of people to rally around the former governor, but it's important for people to understand that the reason why there are still more people choosing to not rank him than actually support him is that more people actually don't want him to be the mayor. And so you have a lot of people that are aligning behind old relationships as opposed to what's best. And what I'm clearly conveying to people is that look at having judgment not just a name. 2008, I was focused on helping Barack Obama become elected. Andrew Cuomo was saying shuck and jive. During COVID, he was focused on a nursing home policy that led to 15,000 people who died. We were feeding people. And so I think at the end of the day, the establishment, for whatever that is, aligning around a name that they recognize, and candidly, the fear they think they have towards him and about him is breaking, because the numbers don't lie. There are more people by a significant majority who do not want Andrew Cuomo to be mayor.
Whitney.
Yeah, I guess I think that is true, that Cuomo has high name recognition, but has high negatives. My belief is that there are more people who will hold their nose if they have concerns, and many have concerns about Cuomo, and will say, do we really want to turn this city over to a 33-year-old who, prior to this campaign, had never managed anything with more than 5 employees? This is one of the largest bureaucracies in the world. Even putting aside his defund the police, abolish capitalism, hatred of Israel, absolutely disqualifying things, just utter lack of experience and qualifications. So I was right back in November that New Yorkers were looking for change. I thought they might pivot to someone like me. Mamdani has stolen that lane, caught lightning in a bottle. And as I said, he has run a superb campaign. I've definitely learned, first time running for office here, it is, if you're a politician, the best strategy is to promise the greatest amount of free stuff to the greatest number of people and tell them they don't have to pay for it. And Mamdani has pulled that off beautifully. I've been raising questions for the last month about his fantasy math. He has absolutely no way to pay for this. And I've been raising all of these questions and been the only candidate raising questions about this guy since I decided to make that the focus of the last month of my campaign, when I realized there was no avenue for me to actually win.
Ray, thank you. The Bronx is up and the battery's down, but so is Brooklyn, where I believe is where Yakov lives. Brooklyn in the house. Yakov, welcome in. Question for Michael and Whitney, please.
Brooklyn in the house. Mr. Blake, as a property manager that's owed over $400,000 in rent arrears, how do you justify telling landlords not to check a tenant's credit report to see if they pay their rent? Like, the only way a property manager could manage property is with income. And look at NYCHA. NYCHA is owed billions of dollars because tenants don't pay their tenant shares. And look how NYCHA is being run.
Okay, Michael.
Yeah, so Yakov, I just want to make sure we have the facts right. So credit score started in 1989. So a credit score is not a determinative factor of how much money someone has and their ability to pay rent. A credit score is impacted by if someone missed a cell phone bill or if they missed a credit card bill at some point. And so to my policy where I've said ending credit scores being utilized, it's happening around the country right now. There's an entity called Ready Life that is doing so. The best determinative factor on if someone can actually pay their rent is, have they paid their rent and mortgage before and consistently? And so there are plenty of people, quite frankly, probably many people on this line, who could not tell you what their actual credit score is, but they regularly are actually paying their bills on time. And I do think that we have recognized and need to recognize credit scores have been an entity that has absolutely led to people being blocked out of having access.
So
Michael, go ahead, real quick, Yakov. Go ahead.
Okay, as someone who literally today looked at 20 credit reports on tenants, landlords don't look at credit scores. They look at the credit report to see if there's judgments, late payments, delinquencies, and all that. God bless America.
God bless America. And you have people in the chat right now who are actually agreeing in real time that credit scores, again, I want to be very clear to the question since it was just raised. A credit score is not the best determinative factor on how someone will pay their rent or mortgage on time. The best way to actually determine someone paying their rent or mortgage on time is, have they done that?
I'm grateful to you both. Whitney with a long and successful career in business, running for office for the first time, and Michael in and around politics, elective office, and things like the Obama campaign. Very grateful as a resident of New York City to have you both put yourself forward, sacrifice for your families and your time and your other interests to put yourself out there and put yourself before the voters of New York. Very grateful to you for doing that and for coming on this evening.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate you. Thank you, Mark.
All right, folks, a few things to tell you about. Tomorrow, morning meeting, Sean, Dan, and I will be here with all the latest. And then tomorrow night, this program will be back. Tomorrow night, 7:30 Eastern time, second episode of Cancer Decoded. And our guest will be Stephen A. Smith, whose personal history dealing with family cancer and cancer of others he knows is an incredibly compelling story. Join us 7:30 tomorrow night for that. And then Wednesday, Meghan McCain on Citizen McCain, her interview with the second lady, Usha Vance. I've watched the whole thing. It's extraordinary. You will get insight into the woman who is currently married to the vice president of the United States, whose husband may someday be president, which would make her first lady. It's incredibly revealing, compelling, and interesting. And when you watch it, you'll see something which you may have already seen in the news, which is Meghan shared the fact that she's pregnant and having had 2 girls, she's having a son with Ben. And we congratulate Ben and Meghan and their girls and their family for that, and you will want to watch the interview. I'm very grateful to you for being part of Two Way, to our 4 guests, to all those who raised their hands and joined us, and look forward to seeing you 9 a.m. tomorrow for the morning meeting with Sean and Dan. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.